You're
It's fine. I'm not doing what I want to do, but I'm still around. I want to do more services, but I am not doing all that. What? Talking to one of the funeral home directors, he said, if you were a saint priest, I could use you all the time.
well, there's always school.
No,
I think maybe not.
well, I'm a kept man.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying.
Good? Awesome.
Ready?
He says good. He says
So
thumbs up.
when do we put the?
I don't think we put them on. I think it's just everyone's school.
Oh, okay.
We're sharing
And they're
too.
all on.
Yep. They're both on.
Okay. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for your patience. We're a few minutes late getting started. We had a few technical issues, and the food has arrived. We can pass out the breakfast to everyone because I think that might make it a little easier than we can get started. My name is Carol Kinsel, owner of Senior Care Solutions, and welcome to Successfully Serving Your Aging Congregation for our 11th year. We are so grateful to our co-sponsors, the Alzheimer's Association, Del Oro, and all of our committee members, Elder Care Management, Bristol Hospice, Home Instead Senior Care, Artisan Mind, and I know I'm leaving somebody out, Oakmont for providing the breakfast this morning, Almond Heights for our beverages. We hope you leave today with some tools in your tool chest to help you as you serve your members of your congregation. Housekeeping, for those of you who haven't been here before, the restrooms are in the corner. And feel free to use them as needed. And we are going to be taking a break or two during the event. And this is also a live event that's a little late getting started. So for those of you online, thanks for your patience. We are ready to roll. To open today's presentation, I would like to welcome Pastor Trevor Mankin, and he's going to open us in prayer.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you all for joining us today. It's lovely to have you all here at Town and Country. Just grateful we have the space to accommodate such a large crowd. So with that said, I thought we would begin our event with a word of prayer and then say a word of thanks for our food. That way you can eat it without fear of getting ptomaine or anything like that. So let's begin. Most gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for the many gifts you have given us in this life. Indeed, you are the giver of all good gifts. We thank you for the gift of family. We thank you for the gift of friends, and we thank you for the gift of our neighbors. We thank you for the opportunity you have given us to serve all of these people in your name. Bless us this day as we learn best how to serve your congregations and your people. In your Son's most precious name, amen. All right, let us pray. The eyes of all look to you, O Lord, and you give them food in their proper season. You open your hand and satisfy the desires of every living creature. Lord, we thank you for these, thy gifts you have provided for the nourishment of our bodies. We ask that they would be truly well received. In your Son's most precious name, amen.
Amen.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. My name is Maureen Lawrence. I'm the Outreach Coordinator for Elder Care Management, and thank you again for joining us today. This year, we're going to do things a little different if you've been with us in the past. We are going to have one speaker, Gail Arno with Elder Care Management, give a presentation. She's going to talk about the stages of aging. And then we are going to break into our panelists, and they will each share from their unique vantage point some more information on that. And then we will do questions and answers at that point. Everyone should have some index cards at their table. That is how we are going to facilitate questions and answers. So if you have any questions, please write them down on the index table, or index card, excuse me, and then when it comes to the question and answer session, we'll just ask you to hold up the card. We will grab it from you and bring it up front to facilitate that part. At this time, I would like to acknowledge those who won the early bird registration. So we have 2 books here to give, How to Navigate Grief at Work, Leading Through Loss, and these are from Margot Fowkes, who is one of our panelists. So it should be a great addition to your library. First is Lila from St. John's Lutheran Church. Lila. And second is the team at Good Shepherd Church. Is the Good Shepherd Church here? Okay, I will hold this for them. Good Shepherd Church, yes. Oh, Lilas, thank you. And there's one, yes. Wonderful, thank you very much. Now I would like to go ahead and introduce you to our speaker and panelists. I will start with the panelists here so that you are familiar with them. Pastor John Haug is the associate pastor at St. John's Lutheran Church. He is one of 2 associate pastors and is the director of congregational care. His call is to encourage healthy Christian living and wellness of the active participants of the church from birth to death. He does this through leadership with a staff of parish nurses, youth and family ministers, and many volunteers, including an active Stephen ministry, Eucharistic ministry, and senior ministry. Ordained in 2009 in Battle Creek, Michigan, where he first served as a solo pastor for nearly 6 years. PJ has been at this work for over a decade and at St. John's for 7 years. He loves that his call as the director of congregational care leans inward, focusing on the self-care of the community, so when we reach out into the community, we can do so from a place of love and wholeness, sharing more of God's love in the world. And that's Pastor John Haug, and he will share with us from the vantage point of a faith leader. Margot Fowkes is the founder of Saltwater Online Community. Margot is the president of On Target Consulting. Through her work, Margot helps organizations and leaders create a more compassionate culture by speaking openly about grief and loss in the workplace. After the death of her son, Jimmy, in 2014, and her mother in 2015, Margot created Saltwater, an online community that provides a safe harbor for anyone grieving the death of someone dear to them. Saltwater is open to everyone regardless of what they believe, where they are in the grief process, how they're feeling, or what type of loss they've experienced. The site provides resources and support for those grieving the death of a child, spouse, sibling, parent, dear friend, or pet, as those mourning a death by suicide or a drug overdose. And Margot Fowkes will be sharing with us today from the perspective of mental health and grief. And on our panel, we have Carol Kinzel, the owner of Senior Care Solutions, and she's been serving individuals and families in Greater Sacramento since 1997. She and her team provide education, resources, and placement referrals for seniors. After graduating with a degree in biology from CSU Sacramento, Carol worked for 18 years as a dental hygienist before founding Senior Care Solutions. In 2010, Carol completed her studies in geriatric care management from the University of Florida. She has served on the advisory board for the Sacramento Senior Safe House, operated by Volunteers of America, and is a current board member on Del Oro Caregiver Resource Center, and has worked on several committees, including the Alzheimer's Association's Walk to End Alzheimer's and the annual Mental Health and Aging Conference. Carol has also been an integral part in many fundraising efforts to benefit local caregivers. A well-known speaker, she frequently presents on a variety of topics and is committed to educating and equipping individuals in the community with tools to navigate the senior care maze. And Carol Kinzel will share with us today from a resource specialist vantage point. And now I would like to introduce you to our presenter, Gail Arno. Gail began her career in aging services in 1998, serving as a family consultant for a local placement agency. In 2010, she brought her experience and expertise to the team at Elder Care Management, providing service and oversight in the growing field of geriatric care management, and eventually serving as the Director of Care Management. In 2022, Gail retired from leading the exceptional team of established care managers and transitioned to a part-time care manager role, but we still keep her very, very busy. Gail received a Bachelor of Science in History from UCLA and a Bachelor of Science in Psychology from CSU Northridge. She also completed a graduate certification program in gerontology and a 6-class case management course certification through CSU Sacramento. She is a California Residential Care Facilities for the Elderly, RCFE, certified administrator and is a state-approved instructor for RCFE administrator certification courses. Additionally, she is a volunteer for the Alzheimer's Association and a board member for Del Oro Caregiver Resource Center. Gail is also a certified care manager through the National Academy of Certified Care Managers and a member of the Aging Life Care Association. And she has a lot of wisdom to share with us today. You will find in your pamphlets there is an outline of what she's presenting on today. It's going to give you a good way to follow along with her presentation. And she's going to start by telling us introducing stages of aging and how to plan for success, and then we'll present on planning for what lies ahead, which is stage 1. And with that, I present Gail Arno.
Well, good morning. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to the panelists for engaging in this fun endeavor. We are going to talk about aging, folks, and please don't shoot the messenger. We're all aging, some of us a little faster than others, and some of us a little bit more gracefully than others, but based on a lot of varying factors. So we're just going to talk about how do you walk through this, not only for yourself, but for those that are participating in your congregation, those that you hold dear in your circle of friends and family. How do you get through this? So I'm not thinking that any one of us quite has to plan like they did just recently in Great Britain. We don't have to go to those extremes, but we probably should put our head in the game and figure out what it is that we want in this aging process, and particularly how we want things to go at the close of our lives. So that's what we're going to dive into first this morning, is just talking a little bit about the stages of aging. So we are aging, and we're aging longer. I think the question is, are we aging better? Are we doing this better? And we've got all kinds of tools and support systems to make life a little easier for us in those latter stages, but life becomes much more complex in those latter stages as well. So really important that we have some sort of plan. Planning, it helps us as those issues arise. I don't know how many of you get in the car and just drive. That's kind of fun. But we don't always have the leisure and the pleasure of being able to live life without a roadmap. So what we're going to talk about today is a roadmap and how to facilitate that. And everybody's roadmap is going to be quite different. So your needs, your wants, your wishes certainly are going to look a little different than what my needs or wants or wishes are going to look like. It's just key to have some sort of plan in place. And even more important, to articulate that plan. Doesn't mean you have to, again, go through great effort, elongated pages and stories and etc., but having a plan of some sort. I know when we buried my 96-year-old grandmother, she had had enough time, and you would with 96 years, to tell us what to serve at lunch following the service, And we did, which hymns she wanted, who she wanted to speak, and what she wanted placed in the coffin. And she wanted to be buried in a nightgown. It was her favorite nightgown. She wanted a bag of, get this one, of microwave popcorn put in the coffin. She thought that was the most fantastic invention in her lifetime. But penicillin was pretty good too, but microwave popcorn was pretty amazing to her. So really important that we articulate some of what we want so we can plan better. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was there is a gentleman, Erik Erikson, who created some psychosocial guidelines on development and aging. He actually was focused more on the youth of this world. He was born in 1901 and he lived to 1992. So he was born at a stage in our world where we didn't live all that long, yet he did. He wouldn't tell you what he did to get to that elongated age, but he had a little bit of a roadmap on things that we can do. So he talked about these different stages. So in the earlier stages, I think we're spending so much of our time trying to figure out who we are, what we are, how do we make it, how do we contribute. We're probably raising families, we're watching parents get older. We're observing. If we do nothing else in this stage, in those 40s, 50s, 60s, if we watch the loved ones that we hold so dear and we see how they did things, we will learn one of two things, either how we'll follow suit or how we'll do things very differently. So there's a lot to be gained in that observing of those loved ones. But Mr. Erikson talked about a couple of stages, actually 5 stages. One was that stage of independence. I'd like to think we're all thriving in that stage of independence. We're born to work toward independence. First thing we do is try to walk, try to run, try to eat on our own, I can do it, leave me alone. Go away. I'm going to tie my shoes, even if it takes me 30 minutes and I don't get it right. We spend so much of our life enthralled in that stage of independence, and then things change. And we head to the next stage of interdependence. And this is where we can lean on family, friends, neighbors, others who are identifying that something's changing and we might need some assistance. Maybe we're moving a little slower now. This is more towards those 70s and 80s, if we can be so bold. The complications kind of set in now, but the other thing that sets in now is resistance. Oh, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm fine. Doesn't everybody use a cane and a walker and a wheelchair? It's a little difficult to say, oh, sure, there's a light switch of dependence. I think I'll just flip that and go forward. So again, the interdependence, we're beginning to lose all of the capabilities, some of the capabilities that we have, but not all of the capabilities. Then we hit that dreaded stage of dependency, and now we truly need some help. Resistance might rise again. Dependency continues to rise. They're a little bit in unison. Resistance is not unusual, and it can be overcome. We just have to learn the approach and the way to get by with that resistance and that dependency. Sometimes the dependency is more medical in nature. It's not necessarily just a byproduct of this stage. I will tell you on a personal note, I have a 38-year-old. She is 100% dependent on me. She is physically challenged. She's not cognitively challenged. Well, some days she's cognitively challenged, but don't tell her I said that. I hope she's not watching. But mostly, she has, the physical needs have come far before any chronological stage. And so there we are in the midst of dependency for a 38-year-old. It comes at different times. Again, I hearken back to a grandmother who at 96 was still traipsing down those basement stairs to get to the wringer washer at 96 because it just worked better. That newfangled one just didn't work quite well. So it really comes at different times, and we have to celebrate the uniqueness of those different times. So dependency is one of the really challenging stages because, again, resistance coupled with some real true challenges can make for a challenging day in and out. Then comes crisis. Nobody wants to get to the crisis. I will tell you that my team at Elder Care Management, likely Pastor John, Margot, and Carol's clients and those they interact with, they spend a bit of time here in the crisis stage. But this is definitely where a care manager will spend their time. The crisis has come. We've done very little planning. We haven't talked about the planning, and now all of a sudden, the crisis has hit. We need services, we need change, we need support mechanisms. That home that was so private and so dear to us has now been invaded by caregivers and people telling me how to wash my dishes when I don't like to wash them that way. So we have this crisis that's arisen, and now we have to problem solve. Not a one of us problem solves at our very best when we're emotionally engaged. And we are typically very emotionally engaged when the crisis comes. We get through the crisis, and here comes stage or developmental stage, according to Erik Erikson, stage 5, which is end of life. And this occurs. It will occur for all of us at different times. By nature of talking about it, planning a little bit, doesn't mean we're going to make it happen any faster. We'll just make it happen, hopefully, with a little bit more grace and ease. And I think that's what we're all looking for, a little bit of grace, a little bit of ease in this tumultuous life we take on. So there are generally 3 broad stages of planning that we can do. And I believe knowledge is power. If we have a little bit of good, solid knowledge, we can take that knowledge, translate it, and put it into play when we need it. And there's an important element of gaining that knowledge, which is making sure that that knowledge is applicable to your circumstances, to your congregation's circumstances, your individuals in your congregation, and that is accurate and clear and concise and to your needs. So essentially, we plan for what lies ahead. We look at what could it be. I wish I could tell you that I have this really magical crystal ball, and I'll loan it to you for $5 million, and it'll tell you what your future looks like. I'm good, but I'm not that good. Nobody has that crystal ball. So doing some of that planning within these stages helps you get through those stages with greater ease. Recognizing that there is a time for support. There is a time for turning to others and asking for help. And I have to admit, I've been in a stage in my life in the last maybe 10 years, again, on a personal note with my daughter. It's very hard for me to raise a paw and say, I can't do this all. Please help. I feel vulnerable, but in reality, it shows strength. So asking for help should be something that we continue to encourage people to do with no harm, no foul. It is not a weakness to ask for help. It is a sign of strength, and we need to reconfigure our mindset for that and make sure that we support our congregation and our friends and family in reaching out. And then the third step that we find critical is finalizing those details, figuring out what everybody wants and how it's going to work, and putting those details into place. I'm thrilled if we put those details tucked away in a drawer and we don't refer back to them for years to come. Just remember where you put them. Don't forget to tell family who's in charge where they are. And as we experienced with a client one time, very organized gentleman, wonderful. He had his ducks in a row. He had a locked file cabinet with passwords and locations of safe deposit boxes and keys and all that rot. And then he went down, and he went to the hospital, and he left behind a very confused wife. And the keys to the file cabinet were in his pocket in the pants that went to the hospital. And we were in the throes of COVID, and nobody could get those keys to get that drawer open, to get insight into what the wishes and the wants were. So let's make sure we know where our tools are when we go about making those plans. Each stage is very fluid in our lives, though, guys. We are not linear. I can't tell you the number of times we get and I'm not picking on you engineers, although whatever major in college didn't entail math, that's where I signed up. But our engineers want it to be linear. Okay, so step 1, step 2, what's step 3? Well, we may have to go to step 6, because step 3 is over this way. So our aging journey is not linear. It meanders because we're human and we as humans meander. So flexibility, the ability to adapt, the ability to change. I would concede that it might be wise to have plan A, plan B, and plan C. And realize that you may be able to pick on any one of them, or you may take pieces from each one of those plans. So we need to have that plan in place, but some flexibility. Our health issues, again, may come early, they may come late. We don't have an idea. As I've mentioned, I have a daughter who it's all come late. I have a grandmother who meandered through life beautifully until the age of 96, took a fall, and 4 days later went to heaven. So we all wish for that, don't we? I can't tell you the number of times people say to me, I just want to go to sleep and not wake up. If I could order that for you, I would order that for you. We can't. So we've got to face the realities of what that might look like. I have to remind everybody, those of us who are couples, we spend a lifetime, hopefully, together, working toward that unification, that togetherness. And aging comes, and that togetherness may go just very, very askew. I sat down with a gentleman last Friday, a very intelligent gentleman. We talked about the lack of unison or tandem aging. And he said, I've never thought about that. He's aging beautifully physically. His wife is aging in a very challenging way cognitively. He doesn't understand why they aren't a unified front anymore. Aging doesn't come in unification like that. We've got to get our loved ones prepared for that. If you're fortunate enough to age together and go through some of these challenges hand in hand, it's fantastic. It doesn't happen all that often. So how do we succeed? Get a good pair of jeans, and I don't mean Levi's, a good pair of real true jeans, but that's a crapshoot at its best. I think the best thing we can do is to do our homework. Find out what's important for you, find out what's necessary and critical in your planning. Look for fact, not fiction. Can't tell you the number of times people have said to me, but my neighbor gets that free. No, she doesn't. Yeah. So do your research. Don't be caught with information that really isn't accurate. And information changes. We are, again, as we are not linear, nor are the resources linear. So you may have to revisit and look at those resources again. Watch others. See what's happening to others, and how would you handle that? How beneficial would that be to you? And then generally, take action. Lay out the plan and work the plan at that point. Knowing all the while, adaptations and justifications have to be made. Within your plan, you should have 3 general categories. Legal matters under control, medical matters to the forefront, and financial matters tucked in. That actually is a tremendous order. That's a tall, tall order. But if you're able to rein in those 3 general areas, you should have success with that overall plan. Who do you connect with? Connect with professionals when you need them. Connect with professionals, and we've got some lists of those professionals that you can check with. Remember that you have the gift of a plan. Here are the list of the professionals that you go through. Now, I think it's really important. You may not need every one of these elements that are listed here, but they're here. Better to know now, I don't need that, but I do need this. I don't need to create a toolbox. My daughter has one. I don't need to have those end-of-life discussions. Check, we've had them. But I do need to find out, what's an advanced healthcare directive? Is that important? Should I have one? You want to discover every element of what's out there available to you and see if it's applicable. Doing it in the throes of a crisis is not going to make it easy on you. You will find it far more emotional, far more difficult. These are important. I want you to, if you get nothing today out of this, and I think you'll get much out of this, I really want you to understand the gift of a plan. It is a gift. It's a gift to others. It's a gift to yourself. It's a gift to the family of your loved ones, and a gift to those you lead in your congregation. Having a plan doesn't mean that you have all the answers, but it is the gift you give those who are important to you. So please make sure. It hopefully will alleviate some stress, make life easier on you. I'll tell you on a personal note, and we laugh now because it's been over 20 years, but my father-in-law, at a young age, 64, insisted he wanted to be cremated. Well, my mother-in-law threw herself on the coffin that he was buried in when he was buried. And while he was gone, he didn't know, he didn't care. He probably watched him from above saying, well, she was always a rogue character. She's true to heart. It was hard on the rest of us who heard him say repeatedly, I want to be cremated. And he ended up in a coffin. So again, having a plan and honoring that plan, and that is a gift that you can give others. My children get a little frustrated with me. I like to talk about this a lot. They think I'm a little morbid. I'm just a planner. I'm just a planner. So the gift of that plan is critical and important to everybody. Here are again some additional resources that you may want to look at. Elder planning, elder law. These are all important. Do you need to talk to an insurance broker? Are your ducks in a row? Are you ready? A hospice agency, they have wonderful tools on how to approach these subjects and what to discuss, what to talk about. So it's important to use the elements that are available to you. And we're not going to go into great detail of these, but I'm going to stay around and answer questions if anybody has any questions. So these are important elements to getting under your belt. So that's just an overview of stage one from a care manager's perspective. Again, I'm always a planner. Now I'm going to turn to this very wonderful and esteemed panelists and give them an opportunity to talk from the venue or the avenue that they have their expertise in regarding this first stage of planning and solving issues as it might be. So I'll hand it over to Pastor John.
I think this is the microphone we're going to use. Is that right? No one can hear me out here, though. This one here? Or this here? How about this? Oh, there we go. Excellent. Hi, I'm Pastor John Haug from St. John's Lutheran Church, and I'm going to talk to you. I was asked to kind of think about practical things through different stages. And you know, when I think about this, I first wanted to start by saying if you're connected to and working with a faith community, it's tough right now. And so if you feel a bit anxious and concerned about your faith community, you are not alone. If you are seeing your volunteerism down, you are not alone. This is nationwide at least. And so thank you for continuing to engage with your faith community. And here's a word of encouragement. Keep going. And maybe my theme of everything I'll say is why it matters to keep going is because regardless of the stage of life, people are always asking, God, what are you calling me to do right now in this chapter of my life? What are you calling me to do? So that's something I want to leave you with is that question matters to people of faith. Getting people to talk about that is really significant in whatever stage of life they're in. I think I'll focus on some practical ideas that as I think about folks in their 40s and 50s. I'm in my 40s right now. And as I think about that, one of the things that comes to mind is many folks are raising children. So I listed some ideas. You probably have a sheet in your binder here about trying some things. And one of my ideas to suggest is to bless high schoolers. And I think saying not your graduates, what I really meant to say there is when you're blessing high schoolers, especially high school seniors, don't make the mistake of assuming they're all going to college and sort of naming that as you bless them, but bless them for whatever's next. So many more are going to community college, so many more are taking a break and working a job so that they can pay their way through college. Some are still going to university or college. So bless them in a way that doesn't make them feel less than for whatever choices they're making, and involve their parents. One thing we did this year, instead of having just blessing kids during a worship service, we're kind of gathering families around the baptismal font in our community after the worship service, because a lot of the kids were baptized at that very font. And so blessing them right there, and then encouraging them to turn and put their hands on their parents and to bless their parents in return. This is something that can kind of draw back people back into the meaningful experiences of church life. Gather people in all kinds of groups. Empty nesters are an interesting group to gather, to be together, to kind of talk about what's happening in their lives. And that's a common thing happening in the 40s and 50s. Gather newly retired folks. Some folks are retiring earlier. Gather them, and gather them with someone who's sort of 5 years ahead, who could speak to their experience. Think about if you do Bible studies with some of these groups, maybe leaning into passages that will relate to their lives. Jesus lost at the temple of 12 years old can speak to both parents and kids around this age. What's it like as their independence grows, but their interdependence is still clearly a part of their lives. These are some of the things I'd encourage you to think about. And when you gather folks, remember as well to not just make it so serious. This is such a busy time of life for career and raising kids, or even those who are single, really investing in their careers. Gather people in playful and creative ways as well. Let them get together to just have some fun and laugh and be together. We need lots of laughter in our faith communities at this time to help us through. And I think that's about my time. Yeah.
The 40s and 50s are such a busy time. I just want to echo that. I think of them as a time of transition because there's so much going on in our lives at that stage. And so much of it outwardly looks so shiny and happy, right? We have kids that are advancing to high school or perhaps college or getting their first job and moving out of the home. We work outside of the home. We're in a very, very active stage where we might be either pursuing a new job or getting promoted, all the things that make our lives rich and beautiful. And I think when you think about grief at this stage, I think the most important thing to keep in mind is that grief can so often be hidden in the 40s and 50s. Because if you take that example of a child going off to college, outwardly it looks like nothing but a joyous time. This child has graduated, they've decided where they want to be, and off they go. And yet layered underneath that can be so much sadness and worry. It might be the first child who's leaving the nest, which brings its own kind of grief. It might be the last child that's leaving behind an empty nest. It also might be a child who struggles with mental health issues or addiction, and there might be terrible fear and worry underneath that. And so I think what's really important to keep in mind as you interact with others in your communities is that the people you meet who may seem like they've got everything together in that shiny Instagram sort of way may have all sorts of grief in their lives. And so when I talked a bit in the handout that's in your pamphlets, I think it's really important to reach out at this stage and stay connected with people, because they are going to be in some ways more reluctant potentially to let you know that they are grieving. when something's going on. And at the same time, when you are talking to them, it's even more important to listen intently, because what they may be sad about, they may have a harder time admitting, because part of what comes with this stage, I think, is a lot of shoulds, right? You should be happy that your child is leaving home. You should be happy that you got this shiny new job or promotion. And so people are even more reluctant to tell you what's happening with them. So I think it's, like I said, I think it's really important to listen intently and to be sure that you understand what they're sad about. And at the same time, because the grief at this stage sometimes is not connected to illness or loss or something where we would all sort of acknowledge that there's sadness and grief around it, it's important to suspend our judgments, because something that might make another person terribly sad might not be something that would make us sad. And so there's just a lot more space there, I think, where we need to offer each other and ourselves grace with all of this. And I think the other thing that's so important too at this stage is that there's a tendency to feel alone at this stage. You know, if you are that parent who's worried about your child having some serious mental health issues in college, for example, that's such a hard thing to disclose and admit. And so it's very easy to get isolated and alone. So community, faith community, is so important for people to feel like it's okay to talk about it and that they're not the only one who's grappling with all of this. So I think it's a time where if you invite folks to share, that it can be a time where they're really deeply embedding in community because they need it more than ever. So, thank you.
I have so few thoughts to share. It's hard for me to get them organized, actually. And it's hard for me to admit that I'm not in this first stage anymore. What comes to mind when I'm thinking of this stage is just personally looking back and thinking this was probably the most difficult stage in my life so far. And it just came to my mind listening to Margot talk about grief. That was the period of time when I dealt with my father with Alzheimer's disease, a 10-year journey with him, and it was turned our whole family upside down. And I really think this period in our lives has so many transitions going on at the same time. It's hard to balance. It's hard to separate your grief. This age bracket is a typical client calling Senior Care Solutions. You know, worried about a grandparent, worried about parents changing. It's rare that we're really focused on our own needs at that time, because I think there's so many other things going on in our life. Coming out of the pandemic, we're seeing more families living together again, working from home, taking care of a parent maybe who has moved in with them, or an adult child that's returned to the home. There's so much going on at this age bracket that I really feel that a plan is a gift, but how many of us take the time to make a plan at this stage? You know, and I know my kids, I've said to them many times about what I want because of what I do. I want them to know I want to be out in the country with animals surrounding the board and care that I'm going to live in when I need care. And they're like, it's never going to happen, Mom. Well, it will happen. You need to hear me. But I go, you know, it's hard to believe you're even at that stage. There's a lot of denial and planning ahead. One of the questions I get, how do I plan ahead or make a plan if I don't know what I'm going to need? Good question, right? The education you give yourself with all the resources in the room, you know, what does it look like when you're going to set up home care for a parent? Because we're so busy in our own lives at this stage, we're focused on our goals, you know, our financial goals, our travel, or what our retirement looks like down the road, keeping our marriage healthy and happy, managing our kids coming and going, financial concerns. you know, when things crop up with your parents or your grandparents and they need help, we want quick fixes. We want to go in and make all these changes and everything's going to be fine because we don't have time in our busy lives, or we can't make time because there's so many balls in the air. So there's a lot of things that go into this, and I think that tapping into resources ahead of time, just for knowledge, even if you feel your plan is going to be fluid, as Gail mentioned, and things change continually, the knowledge you gain every time you tap into a resource and put it in your tool chest will help you down the road. The plan you have at this stage may be changed in the next stage. But don't be afraid to reach out and start having those conversations. Again, I think it's probably the most challenging time, trying to take care of yourself, take care of your loved ones, take care of your parents, take care of your friends, and where's that balance? Okay, thank you.
Good words, good thoughts. This is a time, I think, where everybody is in between. We're tweeners at this stage. Those 40s, 50s, and even 60s, where you are striving for independence, but we see some interdependence, definitely, as we watch those children and we watch those parents. Really sage advice from our panelists, definitely. I don't think there's a right or a wrong way to do any of this. So it's important, again, to gather information, chart your journey, walk alongside friends, observe, look about. But we are tremendously busy at this stage. So it's understandable that we would be torn from one step to the next. So let's now, we'll grow, we'll graduate here. We'll hit those 60s and 70s. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, we have a question.
If you have questions, people with your card will grab any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Oh, here's a good one. I hope I'm worth my weight. And any panelists would like to chime in, please feel free. How do you get someone to accept help or agree to make a plan? Well, let's see. Page 4 says that's a good, delightful question, and it's not easy. And you may never get buy-in, but you can broach it, you can talk about it, and then you walk away, and you know that you've given it your best. I think all of us here speaking to you today have individuals who will sit down and listen with us, but they may not take our advice or our guidance to heart, and they walk away. Or we get at this 40s and 50s stage, and we want permission. We want to be acknowledged that our parents or our responsibilities have gone rogue, and we can't rein them in. I can't tell you the number of times I've sat with a family member that we're working with, and I've said, it's okay to walk away. You did what you needed to do. You attempted it. Nobody will hold you accountable, responsible for this. You did what you needed to do, and away you go. And giving permission feels better than that total frustration. So I think it's really important to find out what the best approach is. I'm often asking behind-the-scenes questions. So what floats your boat for your mother or your father? My mom listens to her doctor. I'm going to the doctor then. I'm going to hit that doctor first and see what we can get out of that. So again, find your ally, know who you're fighting against, and hope that you can get agreement. Denial is a very real place for a lot of individuals. Resistance is very real. So you do your darndest, you take it from there, and you go from there. Not easy. Don't wish that upon anyone. Other thoughts? Any make sense? Carol sees, I learned from the best. Carol sees this too.
I will tell you that you have to be really creative. And Gail said, about you've done all you can do. If they still are resisting, you've done all you can do. I can't tell you how many times we've said that to people. If regardless of who it is that's trying to help, know in your heart that it's ultimately up to them, unless there's, a conservator or something, the person doesn't have capacity. But you're planting seeds. You may have a window of opportunity to initiate those seeds, and a lot of times people end up in crisis, and that's when change happens.
So we have another question here, which is, what are the spiritual needs of people in their 40s and 50s as their parents are aging? It's a great question. And what came to mind to me first is how meaningful it has been in my own life when someone has listened to me and taken the time to simply say, "You're doing a good job." This is an age of exhaustion. If you're parenting kids, you often feel like you're failing and you're anxious for your kids. If you're sandwiched and also helping aging parents, it's hard to get people to do what you think they should do, and it's hard to know what's best for them. So, as Gail was saying, you suggest, and you also have clear boundaries. So I think encouraging people in this really busy time to take out moments to care for themselves, to not forget who they are in the midst of serving a lot of other people, so that in the later chapters, maybe when some of their time frees up, they haven't forgotten the core of who they are. Inviting them to breathe and think together and wonder about their lives and wonder how God is still calling them and encouraging them, loving on them, letting them know they are doing a good job as best they can. I think that's a core spiritual need.
Excellent. Very good. I think that's a very poignant on both ends. We can't solve every minute, every problem that comes our way, but we can work together to get to an end that's comfortable for everyone. I'm going to try one more question, and we'll address the others in just a little bit. This is asking, how can parents involve their children in making a plan for the future? And I think it is critical for parents to try to include children, and children to try to, particularly 40s, 50s, children to encourage their parents to engage in this conversation of planning. One of the, I think the easiest approaches to get someone to break down those walls and talk about things is the younger, the 40 to 50-year-old going to a senior, to their loved one, and saying, I'm realizing I need some tools. I need some financial guidance for my retirement. How did you do that, Dad? How did that go for you? And instead of saying, so Dad, what's your plan? Tell me, I need A, B, C, D, E. Just tell me right away. I know you never tell me anything about your finances, but I need you to just open up right now. Do that for me. Maybe couch it in a way that Dad says, oh, well, here's how I did it. And you get that wall broken down, and Dad gets to be that preeminent specialist on this. And he then is teaching that adult child how he went about it, and they may be able to dovetail off of that. So turning that question around just a little bit can be very helpful as you approach with any resource, particularly with our very determined, steadfast seniors who don't really want to talk about it. So we want to open those doors the best way we can. Okay, we'll come back to a couple other. We'll go on now and talk about this next glorious stage that I'm in, and happy and grateful to know that I'm waking up each day and recognizing that. So here we are with the 60s and 70s, and again, typically we've now got some physicality, some issues that might be presenting themselves. It's a focus more on some of the diagnoses and some of the challenges we face, but for the most part, many of us are functioning quite well and managing. Home is still our greatest focus. It's where we are, it's where we want to be, but we might be realizing that we need that help. We might need some help with the instrumental activities of daily living. We might be handling those, the banking, the scheduling of resources to come and mow the lawn, housekeeping support. Those are activities that need to get done that we might farm out. Or we may be able to handle some of them. There are also are activities of daily living that now may become much more difficult for us. Bathing, dressing, grooming, hygiene, all of the care, all of the support, medication management, all of the things that really pull that world together at this stage. We may have to look outside. We may depend on family or turn to family. We may turn to friends. We may turn to church. But in the bigger scope of things, these are things we cannot bypass and we need attention for and attention to. So now our home has become invaded and we have strangers in our home, and that doesn't always feel great. We're also watching our friends in their journey and what they're going through. Well, gosh, my neighbor's daughter moved in. My daughter won't even come visit. We're measuring all the time. We're worried about what it looks like for us. How do we bypass that? How do we not feel that we've been left behind in that regard? We may have added responsibilities, as our panel has mentioned. We may now be picking kids up from school because the parents are busy in their careers and they're unable to do those kinds of things. So now not only do we have to keep an eye on our loved one, our partner at home, but we also have to leave them for a moment to go pick up and solidify the life of our adult children and make sure that things are working. We've got those added responsibilities that we're feeling. We may have some waning mobility, some waning strength, some waning energy at this stage. I don't know about you guys, but I am not 25 anymore. I don't do so well without a good night's sleep. Okay, and that's why we have children when we're young, and that's why we are able to manage some of those challenges. I'm a little loopy when the sleep isn't really what I need. I'll admit that a Saturday or a Sunday, I might just lie down and doggone it, that nap feels pretty good. Remember when we fought those naps at 5, 6, 7? Sign me up now. I'm ready to relax a little bit with that. So we have some changing going on at this point. We might feel some social isolation. The kids aren't coming because they're busy. They're active, and you don't want to be a burden, and you're not a burden. It's my least favorite word on the planet, burden. Nobody's a burden. If we verbalize those needs, we let people know what we need, we set some boundaries, then we know what our loved ones, our friends, our families, our informal support systems can do to us. We now may need to turn to formal support systems. What does that look like? How are they qualified? What does that cost? How long will they stay? Will they stay if we need them more? Will they go if we don't want them? Discovering and investigating all of those elements is a really important part of the homework we have at this stage to be better prepared. Our support systems are shrinking. Our friends are beginning to pass now. We're losing that support system to a certain extent. And so we have to turn to those more formal mechanisms. Do we make a move? Is this the time? What does that look like? Whatever you do, don't make the promise to your loved ones, to anyone influential in your life, that promising that you'll never do this, you'll never do that to them, you'll never move them, you'll never bring a stranger into their home. You're setting everybody up for failure. You might want to say to them, we'll make the best decision we can when we get to that juncture. Together, we'll make the best decision we can, keeping safety and wellness in mind, rather than making a harsh and strong decision that you may gyrate on later on down the road. Well, and I can't tell you the number of families, husbands, partners, wives that say, but I promised him I'd never do this, or I promised her I'd never do this. Those promises can really come back to haunt us at some point. So let's make a more generalized plan that doesn't harm everybody in the process. So again, our couples come along here. We're not going to age in tandem. What's your plan? What if one of you has to move and the other one gets to stay home? How are you going to get there? What's your transportation look like? Are you still driving? I met a man yesterday, delightful gentleman, told me that celery is what ran his television. And he was determined. Celery ran his television. He had a stalk in his hand. We went out to his garage and we looked at his cars, and I said, "So you don't drive these cars, do you?" "No, but I will soon. That's my plan." He shouldn't be driving those cars. They've been taken away for a reason. So again, we have this change, this balance that we're looking for. And again, this may be a quick onset. It may be an actual medical concern that raises its ugly head. It may be a slow and gradual process, but we need to be prepared that it's coming, that it's upon us. So here it comes. It's gradual for some, it's emergent for others. We continue to be in denial. Well, my friend has a heart problem, but my heart problem's pretty good. I've got it under control. We don't have all the tools, perhaps. So again, it comes gradually. We handle it. The crisis tends to hit, and are we ready? Are we planned? Are we available? Do we have all our ducks in a row? Have we revisited what those resources were at this stage, and are we ready to reevaluate them? Are we addressing, again, that additional responsibility to that partner? Are we understanding that the needs of one does not outweigh the benefit to all? So again, we see so many together saying, "Oh, well, I'm going to put myself on the back burner," and they may not say it so succinctly and so clearly, but I'm going to put myself on the back burner because I've got to take care of her. And lo and behold, the one on the back burner is really boiling. And what have we done to acknowledge that? And that is one of our biggest issues we face, particularly at this juncture as we age. We tend to say, "I'll get to that next week. I'll get to that next week." When in reality, it's going to get to us much faster than we're going to get to it. Again, the good of one does not outweigh this balance of all involved. So make sure we don't fall victim to that. So how do you succeed? You've got to continually review and revisit your plan. Update it. Find out what does it cost to bring someone into the home anymore. I know when I started in this industry nearly 3 decades ago, it was probably cost effective to stay at home. It's not cost effective anymore. It's actually the most expensive way to age, is at home with care, particularly paid professional care. And we may have to turn to paid professional care. I don't have on my tool belt everything I need to contend with my adult daughter. I have a caregiver. I will talk with that caregiver in the morning and say, "Here's what we need to get done today." If I mention it, I get kind of the eye rolling. If the caregiver mentions it, it's a great idea. So we have to use the mechanisms and the tools that we have to revisit, to get the objectives accomplished. It's important. It's critical in our success. So again, home is often where we want to be, but we've got to evaluate. And sometimes we find that we don't need 5 minutes of help. We need 12 hours of help. Who's sleeping at night? Who isn't sleeping at night? Everybody is unique and different. As I met a client the other day, he tried to explain to me that he's always been a night owl and he's never going to lay down calmly and sleep. So it would not be beneficial to set him up with help at night. He really needs to be sleeping during the day when the world is functioning and the world is in go mode. He is not. He is resting. So his arrangement needs to be a little bit different than everybody else's arrangement. That's fine. No right or wrong way, no clear vision here. We, as Carol mentioned, we need to learn to pivot, think outside the box. What's going to work best for those individuals who are approaching us with this? How are we going to get those resources together? I know at the close of my mother's life, I was new to this industry and I panicked. And I said to my 4 brothers, we need to get a lawyer and make sure everything's in order. Dad's gone, mom's passing. Is everything in order? What have we done? Oh my goodness. It was very valuable. The lawyer looked at things, made a couple of suggestions. You might want to clean this up, you might want to clear that up. And we did. And everybody was able to breathe just a little bit better. We all got along a little easier, I think, in that regard too. Plus we got to look at what the future looked like for her. So again, we review, we revise, we connect with those resources, we figure out what we need, we implement, even when there's denial and resistance. I can't tell you the number of times, let's see, I have worked for Kaiser, I worked for the VA, getting myself in the door to try to talk with families. I'm pretty much a chameleon. You tell me what is going to get me in that door, and that's who I'm going to be today. I'm going to make that happen. Okay, sometimes I have to write down all my lies. I want to get everything straight, but we plan, we strategically plan to get that door open, and then in we go. I can only imagine that my children at one point will say, is she telling the truth or is she lying? Because we know she lied a good portion of her life to manage her clients. They're right, I did. To their benefit, I hope. You have to weigh the costs, again, of your approach. I have a gentleman that I met with the other day, and they have redone their bathroom in their rooms, in their home, so they can stay at home. That bathroom cost a shiny $48,000 to redo. The gentleman looked at me and he said, I've had 3 showers. So far, the bathroom has cost us $13,000 per use. Tell me he's not linear. He's an engineer. It will help them. It will make a difference. You can roll this gentleman into his shower. He can have a shower. Will it do it all? Will it be the only reason he doesn't have to move? It might not. Did it make him happy? Did he feel empowered and in control? Absolutely. Best investment. I would venture they didn't pay $48,000 for the home 50 years ago. But to take that kind of money and throw it into what they feel might make things work is a consideration. Is it the best return on your investment? Is that what you want to be plowing your monies into? Is it better to save for a more rainy day down the road? Because it's likely coming. So where is that investment going and what works best for that individual? I wouldn't plow $48,000 into a bathroom, but that's not my priority. Am I wrong? No. It's not black and white. We want to let this person enjoy that $13,000 shower each time. I'm sure next time I come and visit, he'll give me the math on it again, and we'll be more clear on where that's landed. That makes sense to him. Can't say I blame him in that regard. We may have some considerations and some concern of cognitive issues at this stage too. It isn't physical, it's cognitive. It's that dementia. It's that D word, that word that is truly very scary. We may, again, have a spouse or a partner who's aging physically, a spouse or a partner who's aging cognitively. How do those two meet and stay together? Who is served best in that experience? The physical wearing of the body, the wear and tear of that body, the physical wear and tear of cognitive issues. Maybe it's better for them to be with others who have that same capacity. But am I giving up my responsibility? I married them, didn't I? I should stick through this. We hear an awful lot of the burden, the shaming, the worry in that regard. Sometimes we are not what's best for our loved ones. I had a gentleman that I sat down with many years ago, and I said to him, second meeting, you may not be the best person for her at some point. And he said to me, I don't like you. I said, you don't have to. 2 years later, he called me and he said, Gail, I'm not the best person for her. Where do we go now? And we were ready. We'd done our homework. That is not an easy juncture to get to. That is heavily burdened in our hearts, in our souls, and in our minds. Very challenging. So, do I stay at home? Who do I investigate? Are there home health will take care of this. Medicare will cover this. I don't need to worry. Worry. You do. Need to plan. Do I retrofit that home? Do I find someone who can engage with activities and reinvent and revisit me as a younger person, my loved one as a younger person? Because I don't have that skill set. I can use a scissors, but not carefully. I need to bring in someone who's specialized in this. It also gives a little bit of respite for the one they're caring for. Maybe going to adult daycare centers for a little, again, respite. What are the options? What's near you? What can you get to? What are their hours? What does it cost? All of that's worth investigating. Maybe some care management. We'll put a little plug in here. We have resources. We're happy to answer those questions for you. And then that age-old question, when do you move? Do you move? It is not so simple as, the third Tuesday of every other month. It is so reflective of where you are in that stage, what you're facing, what the finances look like, what the goals were, what the wishes were. Again, did we make that statement, I'll never move you? Not a good statement. But I want to go home. Once we move them, that's all we hear. I want to go home. What's home? Where's home? What does that look like? May not have any relationship to the experience you're having at that moment or they're having, but it's a common thread and a theme that we hear so very often. So looking at, again, if you do decide to move, do I do this on my own? Imagine if I told you at the close of this, by the way, you're all moving the minute you get home. You have 10 minutes. You don't have any boxes, no tape, no markers. Get going. How would you feel? Oy, it would be overwhelming. And we have our wits about us. Imagine if you have some confusion and someone tells you now, this will not be home any longer. We're going to find a new home. How do you walk through that? How do you get to that? And how does that feel good for everybody? I would contend it can. Now, it may not be the first option that you had hoped for, but it can work if we lay the proper groundwork and we do our homework. Very, very important. Okay, so now I've kind of brought the audience down here. All good information, I promise you. But now I'm going to hand it once again to our panelists, see if we can't get some good insight from their venue and see if we can't talk a little bit more about this next stage that we're all working toward. Thank you.
Thanks, Gail. So when I think about this general stage, this 60s to 70s stage, there's growing needs amongst our people in this age, often physical needs and support. So care teams, creating care teams is one way we've done this in my community. If you have someone with increased needs, who maybe doesn't have a lot of family support, gathering a small group of people willing to visit, maybe they already have some connections to this person, they want to be with them, could include the pastor, but may just be kind of a group of folks, maybe they're in a group together, and they're willing to go visit and have lunch and check in and make sure this person isn't alone and they're having some support. That can be a really excellent way to share that kind of care for someone. Taking them a meal, there's a website you can check out, and a group of folks could be checking in with a person like that, providing some food and some kind of socialization if they're finding themselves at home more often. There's all kinds of ways to connect with people. Don't assume age is a limit to texting people. text people, find out what their best form of communication is and use that. And then having boundaries. This is the hard part, I think, about faith communities. We want to help everybody, but know what you can do and know what you cannot do. It's okay to say, no, we can't do that. We've had members, maybe an example could be, we had someone who's about 250 pounds and wheelchair bound and would like to get to church more often. If you don't have someone that can help with that kind of physical need, reach out to kind of some of these resources. You may not have that ability. So you can say no, but when you have that boundary and say no, sometimes we think we need to be strict about it. It's okay to say no and feel bad about it and let the person know. We can't, at our church, we're not equipped to help you with that. But can I help you think through other possible ways? Maybe you have online worship, and that's a second place that folks could connect. Maybe you could kind of visit them and play a recorded worship service for them. So thinking about this creatively and knowing your faith community's abilities and boundaries, I think, helps. And as people's physical abilities change, empowering them. People still have gifts. If they can't drive into evening committee meetings, if you have those in your faith community, maybe they're willing to make phone calls and reach out to people so that your webs of relationships continue to be connected at the community. That can be really helpful. Pastors are limited on how many people they can contact per week. So if you have other people willing to do that kind of care and support, it's so helpful to making sure people feel cared for by their faith communities. Teaching people about self-care. We already talked about this in the last stage. It's really important at every stage. Teaching them that it's okay to take care of themselves, especially caregivers who feel that tremendous obligation to care for their loved ones. It's okay to get a caregiver in and to go shopping and to go out and take a walk and to go out and do something for yourself, to refill your tank so they can continue to care for others. We know this stat that not infrequently caregivers can die before those who they're caring for. They have to be encouraged to care for themselves. I listed some suggestions of things you can try. Again, I'm going to say find excuses to bless people in worship. If they've retired, bless their retirement, because it blesses all those thinking about retirement in the community. If they've made a career change, ask if you can bless them in worship, because it blesses others who might be thinking about that in their own lives in worship as well. Think about this, and maybe even getting an expert from one of these organizations are often willing to do that for us to talk during an education hour on what it might mean to have an advanced care directive. For example, there's a shout out to my parish nurse who's done that, Susie, in our community. Get an expert in to talk with people and start the conversation that might be difficult for folks, and then you don't have to. The conversation is started for you.
I think about this stage as a time of realization, and it kind of harkens back to something that Gail said, where when we're younger, when we're in our 40s and 50s, it's a little bit easier to fool ourselves about certain things. I don't need 8 hours of sleep. I can still go run that 10K, even though I haven't been running very much. And I think when we hit our 60s and 70s, we start to realize what's going to be true for us about certain aspects of our lives. And that can be everything from something that we didn't achieve in our career, some athletic endeavor that we can no longer do, or truths about our children. For some, their children may decide not to have children, and they may never be grandparents. Some of their children may decide not to marry. Some of their children may decide to move home or need some sort of care. And so all of these realizations, I think, really hit us hard in our 60s and 70s. And we've touched on a number of the themes of how this manifests. There's the caregiving theme, where we may be caregiving for our aging parents, and even if we haven't been in earlier stages, or we may be continuing to care for them. which is really a marathon at this point, or can be. At the same time, we may have kids who are moving home, we may have grandchildren who need us, so we can still potentially be part of that so-called sandwich generation. We're having to face the realities of our bodies, right? We expect, I just hit this stage, I expect to be active and completely healthy all the way through. But that may not prove to be true, right? Things can go wrong. We may have illnesses of our own. We may have physical challenges. We're facing that question about independence. Can I remain independent? Can my husband remain independent? What does that mean for us together as a couple? Who's there for us at this stage? It's a lot easier to feel like I can handle this, I don't need help when you're younger. And now sometimes people look around and think, ooh, my kids live far away, or maybe I didn't have children, and there's nobody really who can step in and help me at this point. So I think one of the things that makes this stage so challenging is this idea of what I call dashed expectations, where we really expect this stage of life, I think, to be a certain way. We have a vision of how healthy we're going to be, what we're going to be engaged in, what our family's going to look like. And many of those things may not come true for us. And so there's the grief around the fact that it is not the way we wanted it. But whenever we expect something to be true and then it's not, even if the way it is isn't so bad and may have a lot of beauty to it, we still get disappointed and sad sometimes about what we expected not happening. I think comparison is also a theme at this stage too, where, for example, to use myself, we have a surviving daughter who's just launching out into the world now because of COVID, keeping her working from home, etc. And she's been telling us, I don't think I want to have kids. And I'm trying really hard to not react to that and just, whatever you want, honey. But wow, I really want grandchildren. And so those kinds of things, I think people in your communities are dealing with. As already been mentioned, I think self-care is important at this stage. I think movement is important at this stage. Suggesting a walk, getting out in nature, there's something so healing for people. So when someone comes to you and they're just stressed and overwhelmed, sometimes that can offer just that moment of ease from their pain and suffering. I think also having resources for support groups and therapy and other kinds of mental health services are really important. And then finally, when our son was diagnosed with brain cancer, which is what he died of, we were given this binder by the hospital. And on the very first page is a single sheet of paper, and it had 3 questions on it. What is lost? What is left? What is possible? And we navigated the 8 years of his cancer journey by remembering those questions and doing everything we could to focus on what was left and what was still possible. And when I think about this stage, I think helping those who serve think about life in that way can be so helpful for them and really allow them to focus on the joy and the gratitude that remains.
So this stage, when we're helping our clients, what we tend to see is the parents or the grandparents that you were concerned about are now well into the phase of needing the resources that you were investigating earlier on. This stage of your life and the clients we serve, they're supposed to have more time on their hands, or more time for self-care. And you also look at your life and how many more years, quality years am I going to have, and how much can I fit into the rest of my life? How can I still have purpose in my life? How can I still serve? There's so many things that go through our mind. And I have a sister that's 12 years older than I am, and she's constantly a reminder to me, because she says, I'm just letting you know what's ahead. you know, as she goes through this surgery and that surgery and has limited mobility. So, you know, I think people focus at this stage on how can I be the best version of myself with, you know, the years I have left, whatever that is. I know that many folks that we talk to are looking at their own living arrangements, their homes. You know, are they going to be able to age in place? You know, as Gail said, when we bought our home 20 years ago, I thought the 3 sets of stairs was really good exercise. And now that I have a torn ACL, I realize that the stairs are not the best exercise for me anymore. But we're good. So I'm in denial, right? Like many people. I think that it's really interesting to see couples, when we're working with married couples in this stage of their life, it's very common to see very different needs start to sprout up. One person with physical limitations, the other with maybe a cognitive decline, very, very common. And we're seeing more and more younger folks needing care. So it used to be 25 years ago when I started working, it was rare I got a call for anybody in their 40s or 50s. Now it's almost a daily occurrence. So we're really seeing a trend there, and I can't answer why. There's many reasons why that's going to happen. In this phase too, what we hear is, I've been estranged from my parent, and now I'm in a position where I have to make sure this person is cared for. I'm angry. I'm resentful. They were not a parent to me, and now I am in a position to care for them, and I'm going to do that, but it doesn't feel good. And that's a real common theme that I hear. Also, you know, or if you're the senior calling for themselves, my kids haven't had anything to do with me for quite a while. We have an estranged relationship. I have no one in my life. So there's all these, you know, comes to fruition in this age bracket, I believe, that, you know, the relationships that have fallen apart or what has happened in your past really becomes evident when things start to change in your own life. And you start to have to care for a parent, but you don't have other siblings helping you. Everybody's vision is a little different about what needs to happen. So it's about bridging that, and do I rekindle a relationship, or is it unhealthy for me? How do I help this person if we don't have a healthy relationship? You know, do I reach out to care management so that person can be my navigator? You know, typically I see people still advocating, and sometimes there's a happy ending where actually they start to bridge that gap again, but sometimes not. The couple's aging differently. I have to help people place a loved one all the time, and sometimes the healthy spouse moves right with them because they don't want to be separated. And sometimes the healthy spouse will tell me, I'm not a caregiver. And I ask for caregivers when we're working with them, know your line in the sand. Know what you're capable of doing, because your own health is important too. Some will hang in there till the last breath and compromising their own health without the support they need, and others will, right out the gate, say, you know, if incontinence starts, I'm done. So just know that this is a very challenging time too. I think there's less of a myriad of transitions going on, but the transitions that are taking place are pretty significant. And I think that wraps it up what I'm thinking right now. I have too many thoughts in my head.
All good thoughts. All good thoughts. We know that. Thank you, all three of you. Such poignant and valuable additions to kind of the generalized approach that we're taking here. I wanted to just make a quick comment. Pastor John, thank you so much for reminding us all about self-care. There is a tremendous difference between being selfish and self-care. There's not a person in this room, by nature of the fact that you're here, who is selfish. You are managing and acquiring self-care right now as you try to get those tools that you need to make it through this journey. So well done, you. I don't think selfish applies at all. It's self-care. And it's as simple as the old adage of, we put our oxygen mask on first and then we help others. So true in life. I am no good to those who I'm supporting if I'm a train wreck. So I need to take care of me too. It's not selfish. It's impressive. It means you have boundaries, strength, and acknowledgement of what you need as well. Again, the good of one doesn't outweigh the good of many. Okay, we have a couple questions and then we'll take a break and give you a chance to visit some of the vendors and get more information. And this one certainly have some answers. We'll hand this to the group. Are there any support groups specifically geared for people having to make a decision to place a loved one? And I think we'll hand that to the resident expert, Carol.
Delaware Caregiver Resource Center and Alzheimer's Association has a myriad of support groups listed on their website. I think also, besides the support group, I think there's individuals that are really good when it comes to counseling, because that is a tough role to play and have to make that decision for someone or try to work with somebody toward that goal. So there are support groups out there. You have to find the right support group for you, because sometimes the first visit to a support group might not be the right fit. So a lot of the senior communities, Almond Heights, Oakmont, I'm sure they have support groups on site as well in their communities. And some people attend those long before they need to look at placement, just so they can get the tools in their tool chest. Delaware Caregiver Resource Center, they're family consultants. If you're registered for them and you're caring for a loved one with memory impairment, their family consultants are available. They have counseling available. So there's a myriad of things you can reach out. The minute you start making calls for help, it'll feel like you have a little support group, around you, I'm sure. So.
I think that's very true. The additional comment to this question was Zoom doesn't always really provide that intimacy that we're looking for when we look for support groups. I would support that 100%. So I think, as Carol mentioned, and she's selling herself a little bit short. Carol facilitated a support group, particularly for men, for years and years and years, that grew so large and had such a good following. They actually split into two groups, the gentleman that had placed and the gentleman who hadn't placed loved ones. So, because that is a very different journey as well, when you're still in the general mode to prepare for this, and then when you pulled the trigger and you did it, feels very different. So finding a mentor, finding an outlet, finding someone to talk to, one-on-one counseling, the facilities, you don't have to be in the facility to attend their support groups to learn. It gives you some good preparation. You're right, we need that physical touch of being with each other as we are now. Not easy, not easy. Good question. Did you have a few more?
This might be good for after the last session.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay. We have another great one, and we'll probably hand this to Pastor John. How can the church address the grief that comes with the physical and the cognitive aging and help the congregants make meaning of it and quantify it, qualify it, justify it? And can you?
That's a really important and tough question, I think. In churches, I think one of the ways we can do this is, Carol, you kind of mentioned having people at that chapter head like your sister. I have found that to be meaningful. If you and your church leaders are connected to your people in a way where you know what's happening in your life, inevitably, you get these sparks. Oh, I know someone who just went through this. And it's often incredibly valuable to connect them. But I think the pandemic made this a little harder for people to connect. So sometimes you have to kind of smush them together. I've done that through, hey, I know someone, can I send a text message to both of you to link you together? I think having coffee and being able to talk to this person who just went through that is going to be really meaningful for you. Or can I send an email amongst the two of you or three of you to connect you together? Encouraging that, noticing kind of patterns in your community can be helpful, and not just gathering, you know, all the people that are about to retire, but gathering them with someone who's already done it. So they have some kind of mentors. And then you might, you know, I'm thinking about this on the fly, but you might have opportunities again in worship to kind of name these chapters. Kind of blessing people for certain things. Maybe you have an Alzheimer's Awareness Sunday. Maybe you have a Cancer Survivors Sunday with the permission of your folks who are, or a special kind of gathering for them to do that. So there can be ways where you could use some kind of worship elements to normalize things that we often don't talk about or hide. And that can be a really helpful thing to do. We have a blue Christmas service. I imagine some of you do something like this as well, that honors grief and loss around the holidays. Because not everybody's feeling wonderful at that time. So finding ways to kind of implement some of these things in your community's life could be helpful.
Excellent ideas. I don't think we have to lose someone to feel that loss or grief. These stages bring that loss and grief as we go. So excellent. Thank you, panelists. We're so blessed. Okay, I think we have time for about a 10-minute break. 11 o'clock, we'll meet back. Again, a little time to meet our vendors and talk with them if you have questions. And we'll pick it up at 11 and we'll end with a bang. All righty, enjoy your break. Oh, there's food and available, drink, coffee. Please give yourself sustenance so you can come back and join us. Okay, we've got our panelists back. Let's go ahead and dive into our final stage and our closing session here. See if we can't give you a few more nuggets to walk away with. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking a minute to see our vendors, talk with them, and get a good sense of what they contribute to this aging journey. So now we're into that final stage. It is definitely both age-related and incident-related. We're now into really navigating some of those elongated health concerns and questions and challenges. Again, there are but a few special and fortunate individuals who are able to emulate what the Queen did, the Queen of England did the other day, you know, to be fully dressed on a Tuesday and meet what was her 16th Prime Minister, and then Thursday to be gone. I think that's ideal and wonderful. but I suspect we weren't privy to the road prior to that, getting dressed and meeting that 16th Prime Minister. So we all have challenges at this stage that we face. We become really more and more dependent on that support mechanism that we have created for ourselves. We find ourselves each day waking up and taking inventory of what the next challenge might feel like and how the body feels, etc. So again, more health-related issues coupled with that aging process, and here we are at those final stages. So you can see the health is declining. We're reevaluating, and I think Margot touched on this too so very nicely, that we have these expectations and wants and wishes, even into our 90s we have wants and wishes. And so to think that those expectations and all those desires go out the window, we don't have any concerns, etc., not true. We are wondering, did we get enough done? Did we meet the challenges that we wanted to meet? So we have some emotional reflection here, along with that inventory of where the body is at this point. Did I do what I intended to do? Did I wrap up relationships? Is this the best time to wrap up relationships? Sometimes that's doable, sometimes that's not doable. And how do I find my peace with that? I think the other thing we find at this stage is we can't go backwards. We can't correct what we might not have done the way we thought we were going to do it. We don't get a do-over. So we are facing some of those harsh realities as well. So what does come next? And then even beyond that, next. There's so much to tie up at this point, and it's challenging and it's emotional. We see in the course of my line of work, I see individuals who face it and I see individuals who don't. And that's okay. They have to find their comfort in their journey. We try to make recommendations, suggestions, etc., but these journeys are individualized, most definitely. So the process is continuing. We're learning, we're living. We don't feel our best, and yet we're getting up each day and we're making those things happen that need to have happen. We're getting ready to say goodbye. I had a grandmother, again, that lived such a long time, and she had 5 children, and she buried 3 of them. And I remember asking her one day, "Grandma, how did you contend with burying 3 of your children?" And very calmly and very, very non-emotionally, she said, "Gail, if you're going to live to 96, you're going to bury some people. You need to get adjusted and ready for that. I don't love it, but that's what we need to do." So she was ready. She didn't revel in it. And I asked her, "Are you ready?" And she said, "I've got my instructions. I'm ready." So she had the time to do that. We don't all have the time to do that. So again, death is knocking on the door. It's imminent. I have a number of times where clients, family members will say to me, when will they go? When will this happen? We don't have any idea, even when we're at the latter stages of life. Some hang on. I've often heard, and we have hospice representation here, that we die as we live. We may go down fighting and kicking and screaming. We may go down gently and gracefully. We die as we have lived. So we need to be prepared for that. I've had many that have prepared wonderfully and it's gone great. I've had many that have prepared amazingly, and it's been a rough road. No guarantees in any regard as we do this. So how do we do this wisely, well, and with all our tools that we've accumulated? So we confirm those life wishes, those end-of-life wishes. These are those tough conversations. I don't think anybody wakes up in the morning and says, "Oh, great, I'm going to have that emotional conversation today. This should be really fun." But they're so very necessary. Some individuals can go there. My daughter is very open. I will occasionally come in her room and say, "Is there anything I can get you?" And she'll say, "Maybe a noose today? Would that be the way?" It's a joke. It's her way of saying, "I don't feel so great, but I'm here. I'm doing it. We giggle, we laugh. I don't have any nooses, I don't have any guns. I remind her that I don't keep anything in the house that way. We need to definitely at this stage really understand what services are available. We're not in a restorative capacity at this point. We're really just sliding into comfort. And hospice, I think, is such a frightening word for so many at times who don't truly understand the value of hospice. So I really, really implore you to get a good understanding of what that might mean in your life, in your journey, and in your loved one's journey. I had a gentleman on Monday who we got back to his facility, and part of the condition for him going back to the facility is that he would entertain a hospice evaluation. He said to me, I told him yes, but I'm not going to do it. And I said, let's just prove them wrong. How would that feel? Oh, I like that. Let's do it and we'll prove them wrong. Whatever angle it takes, we want to utilize that angle. But understanding what that offers, what that means, it is not a death sentence. Just by talking about it, particularly with hospice, doesn't mean tomorrow will be the close. It means we're prepping, we're preparing, we're putting all those tools together, we're utilizing them the best way we can, and we're coming to some conclusions. Comfort is the key element here. It's not restorative. Doesn't mean that if you're under hospice care, for whatever reason it might be, and they will define what your reason is, you take a fall and have a head bleed, they're not going to say, well, yeah, she was on hospice anyway. No, we're going to attend to that emergent issue unrelated to that overall hospice diagnosis, and we're going to be restorative at that moment. We're going to correct that fix, and then we're going to continue on in that comfortable approach, in that comforting approach. This is that time when we really do want to talk with people about what their wishes are. My daughter is adamant that her body should be looked at science. I think science will look at her body and go, what went wrong here? Wow. And that's okay. She's willing to devote to that. There isn't a child she's leaving behind. There isn't a spouse she's leaving behind. She wasn't given those opportunities to develop those relationships, but she was given the opportunity to promote science and see if they can find an answer. I don't particularly love that, but I will honor that. That's what she has spoken about. So I've listened to what her wishes are, trying to talk and open that door and get a sense of how you feel, how they feel. I think it's very, very important, but better understanding what each service offers at the close of life is really important at this stage. Put those choices in writing. If you don't want to talk about it, put them in writing, a simple outline. Again, I don't think any one of us has to go to the length and the degree that the British monarchy goes to, but something that says, I'd like this, I'd like that. I like music. I'm very adamant about what music will be played at whenever anybody gathers when I'm gone. I don't really care what they do when I gather, but I really want some music there. That's important to me, and I'm very specific. As Grandma was specific about her chicken salad, I'm specific about the music that I want played. I need to make that known, put that in writing, and make those final arrangements. Nothing worse than not knowing what someone wants. It's pricey. There are different costs. You can have your ashes buried in front of a tree and that tree will be watered and that tree will grow. You can go to a more traditional route and have a burial in the ground. There are so many different ways to go about these closing arrangements. But if you don't talk about them, then your loved ones don't know. And you don't want any surprises at the end of anything either. The important element at this stage is to verbalize. Verbalize as much as you can. And even if it isn't formal, perhaps you're sitting down with a loved one and they begin to talk about it, you can simply say, how about I make a few notes and we'll just tuck that into your file. Okay, if you must, Gail. Yes, I must. I want to make sure those notes are present so we can refer back to them. Again, it's that gift we give to those loved ones. So you're going to confirm again and make sure that we feel, whoops, we're frozen. We're frozen. We can wing it. We wing it all the time. Again, connecting with the hospice, there are actually some formal mechanisms that you can utilize. Final wishes, conversation pieces. They will provide you with this guidance, this outline of how to talk about this, how to put things in place. These are great to investigate, to just figure out what it is that you want. They'll generate the conversation. You don't have to feel that pressure. Let's open this up. Let's look at 5 wishes. Let's look at be remembered. Let's talk about it. Let's set a plan to meet and talk about this. We get through it. We give each other a hug. We tuck that away, and we know that it's there when we need to refer back to it. Nothing better than making those wishes and those wants known to everyone. There's also the Conversation Project and Compassion and Choices. These are all opportunities that will open that door and allow you to have those conversations. So we really implore you to discover those and know that they exist, and making sure that your loved ones' wishes are out there and well known. And then I think we've talked about this, I've talked about this quite a bit before, but I really want to emphasize that all of us, many of us, are so hesitant to take this topic on, bring it into our heart, to our soul. It's important. Making that plan is the gift. You really have to look at it that way. It's the gift you give your loved ones so they know where to head. They know what to do. They know how to be when in this time of emotional upset, emotional crisis. Be reminded that you can die at home, you can die in facilities. Our hospitals are not too keen on you dying in our hospitals. Remember, a hospital today is an acute care environment. As sad as this might sound, they treat them and street them. So if you think, oh, I'll just take them to the hospital, then they'll do all the details. They don't want to do that work either. So making sure that you've made your wishes known is really important. It helps those that you leave behind. Nothing worse. Clearly, I think the members of the British royalty knew exactly what they were supposed to do. That likely, in a hard time, brought them some comfort. I'm to walk this way, I'm to look this way, I'm to dress this way, because that's what's expected of me. It takes a lot of the guessing out of things. This is not the time to be guessing. Not having a plan can also tear the family apart. I mentioned the experience we had with my mother-in-law and father-in-law, and again, my father-in-law had no clue. He was gone and his soul had moved on. The rest of us were pretty reverberating from that experience, and it did tear a little bit of that family unit apart for a while. We now kind of giggle. My mother-in-law's gone too. We don't giggle in front of her. But we often giggle a little bit about how emotional she was. They also folded the flag for her because he was a veteran, and suggested to her that on behalf of President Clinton, who was the president at that time, she refused the flag and said she didn't vote for Clinton. So she was a character, most definitely. So those are the little elements you don't want in your... See, no functional family out there. We're all dysfunctional to a certain extent. So at this stage too, again, I know that we have so much planning to do and so much thinking to do. I think we should all also walk away with the idea that we should live our life each day to its fullest. It's here. We might as well make it happen. We might as well make it good for everyone, ourselves included. So this is not a morbid topic. This is a topic that also opens up the door that says, live life to the fullest. Enjoy it. Remember that we tend to die as we live, so that full life is valuable and important, and it comes back and reminds us that opportunity to connect with those that we haven't connected with in the past. We may be able to clean up messes. We may not be able to clean up messes. You have to be prepared for both. Maybe things will tie nicely up with a pretty bow. Maybe they won't. That's okay too. This is just the process. Okay? Okay, so we're going to hand this over again to this esteemed panel to kind of wrap up the other side of the coin and let them pursue things. We've got a couple questions, and we'll answer those after our panelists give us some good discussion.
When thinking about 70s and beyond, I think you want to continue to empower your people to serve through their faith tradition with their changing abilities. So finding ways for them, because they're still asking, God, what are you calling to me now in this chapter of my life? With my changing abilities, my changing body, what are you calling me to? We ask that up until the end. So encouraging them to ask that and think about what they can do, empowering them to do that. I think it's also a time to normalize some of these topics, like you were saying. The word old. I learned the etymology, the root of that word recently. I think it's a beautiful thing. It comes from the root meaning nourish or nourishing. Could we embrace that in our culture? That old is nourishing. It's a time for the garden is grown and it's nourishing. Don't underestimate people's value to those in chapters of life earlier, to share with them what it's like, their wisdom. There are people hungry for that, but they don't always know how to connect, so you might kind of bring them together to connect in those ways. Talk about death. It's okay. If you come from a Christian faith tradition, death's a big part of Jesus' greatest gift to the world, right? Without Jesus' death, there's no resurrection. And so right in our theology, you have a way to normalize a conversation about that. How can death be a gift? And some of this planning that Gail has been encouraging you can be a real gift to families. So use some of our traditions like All Saints Sunday as an excuse to normalize and talk about death. Run a Christian education hour on planning your own funeral and have the person who's leading it, I don't know, wear a birthday hat or something to make it silly and fun. It can be a real benefit for family members to know what scripture did you want to pick, or this loved one, or what songs were meaningful to them. And taking the guessing out of it, like you said, really is helpful to families. It lets them focus on their grief rather than on all the details of what they're doing. So it could be a gift. Maybe your church could keep a file of planned funerals and have kind of information in there. What else? I had a gentleman who was kind of facing his own mortality, and every year he would read, what's the poem? A Night Before Christmas. He would read it every year to his grandkids. And he was just so sad that he was not going to be able to do that at some point. Well, that's about when they came out with these audio recording books that you've probably maybe seen in Hallmark stores or somewhere. This is a time for legacy things. With all our technology, can you record videos for people? Maybe they want to speak about what the church has meant to them. And you can have a celebration Sunday recording some of their stories. Maybe they want to record a story for their grandkids and they just need the encouragement or the idea or someone to walk them through how to do it. This is a time for some of that stuff. Leaving behind legacy things, I think, can be really valuable and important. We've done a thing at our church, two things I think I'll mention, practical things as well. One of our members who is here and a few other members kind of gather because they have the common experience of losing a spouse. And so they started a group called Starting Over, and they support each other. And they meet about monthly. Of course, the pandemic was affected by that, but they're kind of coming back together to share kind of the wisdom of those experiences. The other thing I was going to say here, I don't want to miss this one more. We also have gathered as best we can our 85 and over club and given them a great meal, had the pastors come and speak and shared communion at it, and then took a group photo. And I can't tell you how many of them have showed me that group photo that they keep in their wallet or purse, and it's a really meaningful experience to come together and just thank them and thank them and thank them for all that they've done for the church over the years. Just a few practical suggestions at this age.
So I called this stage the time of reflections. And what I was thinking of is that this is really a point where, because of our age, it's hard to ignore that we are heading to the end of our life. And even if we're still in denial about when that's going to come, and of course we don't really, none of us know, there's still, I think, a lot of reflection that goes on at this time. And for some people it may be really lovely and beautiful as they think about their families or their legacies. For others, it may make them bitter or unhappy. But I do think there is a lot of reflection that goes on. But it's funny, sitting here listening to my fellow panelists and to Gail and thinking about this, I think it's also a time though where people can also not reflect. And what made me realize it was thinking about my own family and realizing that we were an example of sort of do what I say, not what I do. When I was born, my father turned 60. He was almost 61. And I was the product of his second marriage. He already had 2 children in their teens at that time. And my mother was 20 years younger than he was and really wanted children. She wanted 2, he didn't want any, and so they compromised and had me. And I grew up with this very unreal expectation about age, because he was still working, he was still vibrant. He worked all the way into his 90s. I remember when I went to college in 1979, my college roommate, who's still a very dear friend, kept saying to me, I don't think you're prepared for the fact that you could lose your dad. And I just kind of dismissed her, and sure enough, he lived to be 102 and a half. And if he's the quintessential example of someone who was in many ways in denial about his state of being, because he worked until his 90s. 2 weeks before he went into a coma, he was telling one of the caregivers, I'm gonna walk again. So I do think that there's a bigger range here than I was almost allowing myself to think about at this stage. But I think there's some gentle reality that, looking back on things, I wish that someone had given me a bit more of, which is that the end is coming and that the time is limited. And so it's really a time to make sure, if there are things that you're going to regret when you go, to make sure that you look at them. So in my father's case, he didn't so much have this, but if there are relationships, for example, that are fractured or broken, there's a gentle encouraging that can happen at this stage of, there might not be a lot of time to reach out to that person. Or if there's someone that someone you're working with really loves being with, that this is a time to spend more time with that person and to really lean into the things that they love. One of the gifts that my father gave my mother in a strange sort of way was when he was 97, he had what's called a TIA, which is basically a temporary stroke. And I have to confess, it's the first time, I think, for her and for me that we started to really face the fact that Dad was getting old, because he just didn't live that way. But the gift that came out of it was she started to think about the fact that he was not going to be there forever. And so she went to the local community center and she got into an exercise class. And she started taking art classes and a memoir writing class. And she said to me, I want to be sure that when Dad dies, I've got a life that's here and waiting for me. And I think that's another thing that you can encourage those that you're in your congregation to do, is to think about, what do you want to have in your life? Because it's so much more difficult, I think, if the spouse passes away, and then the surviving spouse has to not only confront their grief, but also go out and create these new connections and things like that. So I think it's a time where it's it's a hard thing to do, but it's good to remind those that you're talking to and to remind ourselves if we're in this stage that the days are getting shorter, but there's still this opportunity to do and try new things. I know for both of my parents, having lived at different ages through the Great Depression, they were very frugal. And one of the things that my mom did, which I thought was really beautiful after my father died, was she loved to travel. And so while she was still able to, she took some very long extended trips. And it was one of those things she had to wrap her mind around the idea that it was okay to spend that money and to go enjoy herself in that way. And I think, again, there's a gentle reminder that it's okay to spend that money. It's okay to go do something that you really love, because this is a different stage of life. And then finally, I want to leave you with my mom's friend Eve, who, when my mom met her, was in her mid to late 80s, I think. And Eve was still living alone. She'd never married, she didn't have any children. And the thing that was most important to Eve, besides her garden and going bird watching, was dessert. She just loved dessert. And so, much to the chagrin of her niece, who would take her out quite regularly with her children, her grandnieces, whenever Eve ate, she would always have dessert first. Because she said, I don't know if I'm going to have room, and I want to be sure that I get my dessert. So it was quite the conversation, apparently, with the grandnieces, who were like, well, if Eve is doing it, how come I can't do it? Exactly. But I think that's a beautiful way to think about this stage. It's time to invite all of us to eat dessert first.
That's a wonderful thought to end with. So obviously the type of work that I do and Senior Care Solutions does, we deal with end of life every day. And I'll tell you, not two people do or plan end of life the same or have the same attitude about it. Every family member within a family unit is going to have a different perception of what that feels and looks like. And it can cause challenges when you are trying to have that conversation and plan. I'll reflect back on a case that I worked probably 15 years ago, and it's in the forefront of my mind because I never forgot it. The client had contacted me because mom had advanced liver cancer, and they were moving her into a community. And I happen to know that this facility did not take hospice patients, so if she did move in there, they would have to move her out soon after. So I brought up the subject of hospice. I go, are you aware that when your mom needs hospice with her diagnosis that they will not be able to keep her? I upset her so much by bringing up the word hospice that they discontinued working with me. So that was my first experience with, did I handle this delicately enough? What could I have done differently? I could have done nothing differently. It was just the perception. They weren't willing to have that conversation yet. And oftentimes we're the first person that brings it up. We'll see our clients, you might see members of your congregation that are in and out of the ER all the time, constantly in the hospital, or having continual setbacks. When is the right time to have this conversation? And it's never too late. And I think the message that you need to know when you're helping individuals is if you understand what qualifies you for hospice, you'll have a better understanding of when to initiate the service. And we typically recommend consultations. Have somebody out to do a consultation so you understand the full array of hospice services. Not one person is going to do it the same, isn't going to make the same decision. The average stay on a hospice service is probably 2 to 3 weeks, when you could have months of services covered if you qualify with an array of support, not just for your loved one who's passing, but for you as a family member. The grief counseling, the support is unending. And I reflect back on having our mother-in-law with pancreatic cancer in our home, caring for her at the end of her life. And her comments, she never really wanted to talk about anything. There was no planning whatsoever, so we were kind of left with the task of working with my sister-in-law and setting up care in the home, which was very challenging because she accused us of taking Mother away from her, putting her on hospice. And so even in our immediate family, we saw that happening. And my mother-in-law said, I can't believe I'm dying. I was just raising my kids. How did this happen? You know, but there was never any conversation as she aged about, you know, what's going to happen, what do I want done, nothing. And so, and then on the flip side, you know, I see some individuals who get to sit to the table with their children and have everything mapped out in such a healthy way. I applaud them for doing that, because that's hard. And that's kind of, they've set the table for that probably much earlier in their lives with open communication and just wanting to plan and protect everybody and give them the gift, as Gail said, with a care plan. I remember talking to my parents so many times wanting to make a plan, and neither of them would. And my mom just said, you're just taking me out by my feet. So that's what happened. You know, she had no choice in the matter. It was all on us to make decisions. You know, I think one thing that you have to remember, and this was a moment in time that I'll never forget. We had a different educational seminar we were putting on, and a hospice medical director was speaking. And she said to the group, she said, we have 85 hospice patients on service right now. 83 are actively living and enjoying their lives. We do everything to give quality to their life. 2 are transitioning and leaving this world. But she said 85 are actively living. So I keep that in mind when you're helping others, that, you know, and you're talking to your family. You know, I want to make the best of the time I have. If I'm on hospice, I want to utilize all the services they have to provide. The longest time frame that one of my clients was on hospice was 3 years. They were recertified. He showed decline and met the criteria, but he had the support, and the family had the support of hospice services, which were invaluable. So keep that in mind and involve your family with these conversations. And Lanny came up to me at the break and he said, please remind individuals that when you're making a plan, when you're going to the attorney, when you're sitting with the hospice agency, have your kids there so they can hear what's going on and be a part of this process. You know, make sure they have a copy of your wishes in your plan. Don't put it in a locked cabinet and throw the key away. You know, the power of attorneys, different things, because all these things make it so much easier. We get what we call the 5 to 5 call on Friday night. I need to find a hospice bed for my mom this weekend. It's urgent. She's not doing well. We need to place her this weekend. Take a deep breath, get some more some more information. 9 times out of 10, when things are that bad, the person is already so close to the end of their life that we redirect them. Can we set up home care? Can we get home and sit in there to get more care so you can be with your loved one? Without a plan, this is what can happen. Your family members are scurrying to get things figured out because it wasn't discussed. So 9 times out of 10, this person doesn't need placement. This person needs support and love and someone by their sides at the end of life. So anyway, thank you.
Great, thank you all. And I want to be like Eve. I want to start now and be like Eve. She sounds fun. And Carol's right, I actually called her office at 20 to 5 yesterday and did that to her. So it does definitely happen, unfortunately. We have a couple quick questions, if that's okay, and then we'll hand it.
This is the last question session, so if you have any from the entire presentation, feel free to write them down and let us know.
Thank you. Got it. Okay. This is a great question. I think we talked a little bit about it, but folks are now living well into their 90s. They are, and beyond, 102. Wow. Passing all of their peers, all of their families. This is sad. This leads to great sadness, generalized sadness. How do we handle that? What are the resources? Where can we turn? I think part of this comes back to discussions and support groups and peers and mentors, trying to feel a little better about this experience. I get very frustrated with someone saying, well, they're 96, how come they're sad? Because they're sad, and we're all sad. I don't care if you're 21 or 96. Passing, thank you, is sad. Where do we go from there? Talking about it, accepting it, realizing that this is a part of the circle of life, and we all are going to have to face this at some point, and verbalizing it. There are no quick, easy answers to this. Having lost parents, as we all have experienced, or loved ones, we recognize that time doesn't cure anything, but it gives us the grace of adjusting and better understanding. And then sharing our experience with others. How did you meander through this? How did you get through this? How did you pull yourself up by your bootstraps and walk along and get back on the journey? Again, I think getting that one-on-one help, that therapy, that discussion, support groups, families. You need to know in your family, who can you go to? Who can you talk to this about? Who is going to put up that wall? As Carol mentioned, the family didn't want to talk about it. Mom and Dad didn't want to talk about it. Sister-in-law felt that she didn't have the access she wanted. Again, we have to know we've done what we needed to do. We can look in the mirror, feel pretty good about what we've done, and then find our peace with it. We cannot make them all happy. We just can't. Life is just not set that way. How can the church communities normalize death and prepare congregates to overcome the discomfort that comes along with death and those concerns? There's a light question he can handle. There you go, Pastor John.
I think, first of all, discomfort is a part of death. So, sort of saying that it's not is just not realistic. I think doing funerals and memorial services well in your community, by well I mean supporting families, being there to host the event, making sure you have someone at the funeral who can speak about their life from a personal perspective. And if that's not the pastor, then it's someone else. But if it is the pastor, that they have time to collect those stories. You've probably experienced funerals that feel impersonal, and that cannot be healing and helpful for the family. So doing that well matters. And then, it's not over when the funeral's over either. Following up. We have a bereavement ministry that we have in our church where we send letters and some support materials to people if they want them. And we ask. So doing that well, I think matters. Normalizing it, I think in some of the ways I said, by using those natural opportunities within the year, like All Saints Sunday, and other opportunities like a Blue Christmas or something, or just having a summer series on different topics where you could normalize some of these conversations would be helpful for people. Maybe you all have some thoughts too, but those are what come to mind right away.
Yeah, we have given many presentations on many different subjects and in different locations, and we address this frequently. So if there's any opportunity, we'd love to present at your church and your congregation. So.
And I'll just add one thought too. I think there's an expression that I use a lot of times when I'm doing my consulting work and doing a training, which is the wisdom is in the room. And so I think it's also an invitation to those who've been through it to share their wisdom with other people. I was one of those who tried to get hospice out on a Saturday and discovered in Santa Clara County, where my mom was, that hospice doesn't work over the weekends. If you're not in hospice already, you can't get someone in hospice. And she died the following day. It was quite horrific. But so there's a learning there, right? That when someone else asks me about hospice, I always say, just much like Carol's point, call them early. This isn't a last minute thing. There's so many resources, etc. So I think inviting other people in the congregation who have experience to share it and maybe ease some of the fears that some of those who are facing it might be going through.
I thought of something else maybe to add. I think dispelling some of the myths around grief, I find myself doing often with people as well. There's the idea that you get over it. You know, the funeral's over and it's done. And that's just not true. Grief is lifelong. And one of the ways I've kind of come to talk to people about this theologically is that we have a God that's created us to remember. And in that is a great gift, that the sadness, the grief that we feel is a connection to memory to this person, but it comes at the cost of some pain. But the alternative would be worse, to not remember, to forget and have it out of your mind and not have any of the pain that kind of draws us back to those memories at times. That'd be worse. None of us want to be forgotten. So we're kind of made by God and in God's image to be remembering folks. And I think there's some beauty in that if you can talk to people about that and educate them that grief just kind of evolves over time. It doesn't go away. It just kind of has different moments and shapes to it.
That's poignant, most definitely. Another quick question here. Are there merits or circumstances when the best gift is to allow your adult children, some of the grandchildren, etc., to do what comforts them most regarding death and practices and transactions? And I would think, yes, there's most definitely merit to doing this the way that works best for you. There's no template as to how to do this right or how to do this wrong. If there are family traditions and there are experiences that benefit your family and your loved ones, and family born or family congregating, doing what works best for you is good. That is going to make the transaction easier for you. There is no right or wrong in death. There is reflection, and I think as Pastor John mentioned, you know, there's reflection and there's discussion. The hurt doesn't go away. I think if we didn't love so much, it wouldn't hurt so much as we lose. And so that's an important element. There may also be an element of, oh gosh, I didn't do all the things I wanted to do to support this individual. Ooh, there's reflection. So when I get ready to plan, I'm going to do it differently. And I'm going to give those loved ones a roadmap, because again, this is the one journey we don't want to necessarily be on without a roadmap where we just meander from place to place. It has an impact on others. One thing if we're doing it to ourselves, but this has an impact on others and important others in our lives. So important to look elsewhere. So I don't think there's one way or any way. I would contend probably that our panel feels similarly. So let me give you a couple other quick questions. Maureen, there's a wish for the gift slide maybe to come up at the end. So maybe we could do that. Someone's asking for some access to the gift slides. And then here's a loaded one and a challenging one. What do you do if you cannot afford that extra care in all of these stopping points in this journey? And that's a really tough one because care is expensive at this stage. These are humans. This is personnel coming into the home, doing things that have liabilities and exposures. You have family members that maybe you want to turn to. I know in our family, we knew who could do what for the loved ones that we were losing, and we knew who would not be well suited to do what for those loved ones. Assign jobs, share the wealth, ask for help. It doesn't always have to be professional. It can be informal, as we refer to it. But unless we have a plan, knowing that we may not have the financial resources to support in the home, what's our plan then? It would be better not to bury our head and hope nothing happens, much better to line up that informal help. What would be better than reaching out to church friends, to the congregate that's experienced this, the congregation that's experienced this, and maybe has some knowledge on how they brainstorm through some of those costs that we might face. Carol may have an additional thought or...
Because we run a program that Medi-Cal pays for care, the Assisted Living Waiver Program. We're care coordinators in our office. We're very much familiar with the fact that people call every day and can't afford the care they need. So, we urge individuals, if you know you have some financial restraints, educate yourself on what benefits are available to you ahead of time. When we get the call that somebody's in the hospital and they need long-term care and they have $1,200 a month and they're not yet on Medi-Cal, there's a real problem here. So, we try to get people forward thinking on that, and the Medi-Cal rules and regulations have changed as of July of this year, so individuals can have a higher asset limit to qualify for Medi-Cal legally, which is a good thing. But you have in-home supportive services available if you're on Medi-Cal. There are private duty caregivers are less expensive than the home care companies, but with that can come a sense of risk because you don't have a monitoring body over the caregiver. So there's a smart way to do that, but just know to plan ahead and know if you're going to qualify for Medi-Cal, because you're going to want to get those benefits in order sooner than later.
There comes that dirty four-letter word, plan. Really important, does help. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to hand this now to Pastor John. He's going to lead some table discussions and answer anything further. We're winding down here. Thank you all for your willingness to listen to this and to engage in this experience. This has been an honor and an opportunity that I greatly appreciate. And we'll hand it over to Pastor John, and away he goes.
So this is an opportunity to really give you a chance to talk at your tables. So just quick instructions. If you're at a small table, you might want to join another group for this. But 2 questions to guide your discussion. What did you learn today? And quite simply, what might you do about it? This would be encouragement to own a learning or a relearning from today, and then to start to imagine and verbalize the next baby step you might take from what you learned today. No further instructions than that. You're invited to kind of groups to share in after about 5 minutes now. Go for it. Don't be shy. Someone has to start.
for them when they are facing that stage. So when someone is facing, say, that stage 1, just starting to make a plan, those resources that you can gather within your congregation to help support them in that stage is going to look quite different than it is maybe if someone's finalizing their details. So we also suggest that you look within your congregations to find some of these resources. Carol is a resource specialist and also elder care management. We have an extensive list of different resources in the community, but within your own congregations, you, I'm sure, have these individuals that work within these fields as well. So you can learn within your congregation how you can help support each other and build that support system within, which I think is a beautiful thing to do. I also wanted to mention one resource that came up about how to normalize the conversations about end of life, which is never an easy thing to do. The Conversation Project, if you're not familiar with it, is conversationproject.org online, has some great resources about how to have these conversations with different people. So how do you have that end-of-life conversation with your physician? How do you have it with your child? How do you have it with your congregation? They actually have a congregation Sabbath. They recommend that faith leaders have these conversations, have sermons within their in their congregation to share that message. How do we have these conversations? And that's one way I think is a beautiful way to help normalize these conversations. And they give you the tools to help you do that and how to kind of structure that. So that can be a great resource for you as well. So I want to thank you all very much for coming and joining us today. I hope you learned a lot. We are launching a Facebook page, and this is going to be a way for us to continue this conversation. So we invite you, if you are Facebook people, if you like Facebook, it is a private group. There's just a few questions to answer, such as which congregation you're a part of, what's your role there, just to make sure that we're talking to the people who are most opportune to have this information. But if you want to go on that Facebook page and join the Successfully Serving Your Aging Congregation, please feel free to mention what you learned today, what you're taking away from this. As Pastor John led us in that table conversation, feel free to talk about what you learned and how you are going to make these changes or try to implement something within your congregation. So we invite you to join us there. We would also like to thank all of those who made this event happen. It's 9-10 months in the making. So we had a little rocky start this morning. We appreciate everyone's grace, but isn't that the way life is? Sometimes it doesn't all go according to plan. So we would like to thank our committee who helps bring this to you. Simone with Del Oro, Carol and Christine with Senior Care Solutions, Lois with Lutherans for Life, Denise with the Alzheimer's Association, Tiffany with Artists in Mind, and Susan with Mercy, and all of those who are bringing this. Thank you to our other sponsors, Bristol Hospice, Oakmont of Carmichael for the delicious breakfast, Almond Heights, and also Home Instead in home care. And these are some great resources. If you don't have connections with these resources already, these are individuals who obviously have a passion for serving the community and are taking their time to be here today. So feel free to visit the tables, learn more about the resources that are available to you. And with that, I'm going to have Pastor John close us in a prayer, and thank you again for coming.
All right, I invite us to a moment of prayer. So take a good breath in and out, and then we will pray together. God, thank you for gathering us this day, for the collective wisdom in this room. Help us hold on to some of the learnings that we had and to take a next step towards our wellness. Guide us in how we care for our own aging bodies. Guide us in how we care for those who are in our homes or in our areas of influence. Help us to do that as best we can. Be with this community of leaders here whose hearts are in it. All the support services in the room, everyone here who longs for better wellness for those who are aging, for connection, for deaths that are honored. Help us in all that we do, God, to make this happen through your wisdom. And in your name we pray. Amen. Thanks for coming.
Just a quick added too, you have a survey on